Hi everyone, I'm Cass and this is the Mind Your Being podcast, a space where we'll explore health and what it really means to care for our whole being, our physical, mental and emotional health. Each episode you'll hear from leading health and wellness experts or everyday people who share powerful insights and lived experience. And sometimes it'll be just me, sharing thoughts, tools and reflections from my own journey. More than anything, I want you to feel supported, encouraged and empowered to make informed health choices that feel right for you. If this sounds good to you, please enjoy. My guest today is Dr Tracey Clissold, who has over 30 years' experience as a lecturer and researcher in exercise science and sports nutrition, including nutrition consulting for New Zealand national and also international athletes and coaches. Her research passion is osteoporosis prevention, and she is a PhD supervisor for the University of Waikato, New Zealand. Tracey and the OsteoGains team have created a women's bone health phone app. It's called OsteoGains, and it provides bone health information with the practical exercises used in her clinical trials. Tracey is a proud mum to 2 children and has previously represented New Zealand in distance running, winning several national and international marathon titles, including winning the Auckland Marathon 4 times. Now, my conversation with Tracey today was such a great one. She has so much energy and passion for her research and for helping women especially, to really be educated and informed about how you can prevent the decline in bone density that comes particularly around the perimenopause and menopause time in life. And she was so knowledgeable and just so generous with her education and her time. So please enjoy this conversation. Hi, Tracey. Welcome today.
Hi, Cass. Thank you for having me today.
So I thought to start off, could you tell us a little bit about your background and what first sparked your interest in bone health and exercise science?
Sure. Well, it's been a lifelong journey really for me as a sort of undergraduate way back, doing a degree in physical education and kinesiology, and being an athlete myself. So I was a marathon runner for a few decades and run lots of marathons in Australia, had a few successes, but I've won most New Zealand marathons, represented New Zealand for a few years. So as a young athlete, I kind of had a bit of a experience with negative bone health myself, getting a stress fracture while I was trying to qualify for the Olympic Games selection. So that stress fracture put me out of contention and really raised the profile of how important our female physiology is in not only that short-term sort of situation of stress fracture, but long-term. And a lot of the information that I found when I was doing my due diligence into the research space was information I thought that women should know about, that it felt like I needed to be able to deliver this information to empower women to make good decisions, not just when they have a bone issue, but to be able to create fantastic skeletons to see them out through their lives. So I suppose that's where my passion sort of came from, is really teaching in that space, being an athlete, knowing that how important nutrition and exercise physiology meld together. So a lot of the information about our bone physiology is actually entrenched in nutrition and other things that are part of our lifestyle, which means that these are things we can make decisions about, to make good decisions about, if we know what we can actually do. And most people think that there's really, well, they don't even think about their bone health, because it is I suppose what we call a silent asymptomatic disease that develops over decades. So it develops over our whole life. We don't feel our bones becoming thinner, and most people won't know they've got an issue unless they have fallen and had a fracture, or they've got osteoporosis issues in their family. So they may be aware of it from that perspective. But most women don't really even start thinking about their bones until post-menopause. And there's so much we can do before that, but there's also so much we can do at every stage of our life cycle. So just understanding some of the things we can control.
Thank you for
Mm.
sharing that. That must have been really crushing when you're with the stress fracture and everything.
Yeah, it was absolutely, and a lot of that was things that I could have done differently. And I, even as a student of of these disciplines, nutrition and physiology, I still wasn't able to sort of put that together in the context of my own situation. And so it really is about helping to deliver these messages to athletes, to coaches, to people managing athletes, to parents, and also doing our due diligence, our duty of care for just young people going through life, setting them up as well as we can, knowing that we're going to live longer at the other end because of all the fantastic technological sort of advancements. We want to live with good quality of life, and there's so many indications that we're not doing that. And so, and
Yeah.
we don't have the tools to be able to do that.
And
And it's
prevention can
difficult.
go a long way, hey?
Absolutely can. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Mm,
that's a big message that I'm wanting to share awareness of these issues, and then people can take what they want on board, but at least knowing how important these things are. And as you said, bones, the degradation, the thinning, it's over time. We don't generally notice it, like you said, for women generally.
mm,
And for me, I'll admit, like I said to you earlier, don't know a lot about bones, and I've been lucky enough not to have an issue with them. So I really didn't know anything about them until post-menopause, when you start
mm.
realizing how important bone density is, as you said, for your quality of life. Let's go back to some basics. What are bones made up of? Because, as I said, I hadn't really thought about them, and I kind of thought of them as these inert things in our body, but I've come to learn they're absolutely not. So can you please explain? Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's a good place to start, isn't it? Just a little bit of basic bone physiology. And the first thing I suppose to understand is our bones are living. They're living cells that are turning over constantly. And the environment that we provide will have a lot to do with how healthy our bones are, and I suppose what's happening on the day-to-day in terms of our bone health. Acknowledging also that we have a finite amount of time to build our bone, and that is pretty much 30 years. So our first 30 years, we have capacity to keep building upon and making our bones stronger and more robust. And then from the age of 30, we slowly start to lose that bone mineral density and skeletal integrity, to the point of, from 30 to 50, it can be anywhere between 0.5% and 1% of our bone mineral density, which is the mineral that
Wow.
sits on the outside of the bone that makes it hard. So we start losing that. And that tells maybe 70% of the story of our bone strength, is that mineral that's loaded into the outside of our skeletal bones. Most of that bone is actually developed for women, about 92% of it at the age of 18. So puberty is actually a really important time to focus on bone health, and it's not a time that young women are getting things right nutritionally in many cases. So some of the things that need to be got right from a nutrition perspective are getting enough protein. And we know, the fantastic work that Dr. Stacey Sims is doing and delivering out to women, research that's absolutely applicable to women, not research that's been done on men and has been sort of extrapolated out to women. This is research specifically on women, saying that women actually need more protein than men for our size, which is one thing that women are maybe not getting right. And then getting enough calcium is a key one. So, a lot of people, young people especially, are choosing to not eat dairy foods, for example. And that's fine not to eat dairy foods, but you have to replace them with where you'd be getting calcium from as an alternative. So our plant-based milks that are fortified with calcium, getting enough nuts and seeds, getting enough, of our good oils, our good fats in our diet are all really key. And there's a lot of other minerals that are important as well, but getting them from food is a really important way to ensure our bones will get those minerals. And then, of course, getting exposure to enough sunlight to be able to synthesize vitamin D. And we know in Australia and in New Zealand, we have actually a public health issue of mild to moderate vitamin D deficiency in our populations, which seems bizarre because we have so many sunshine hours. But most people are not aware that when we put sunscreen on our skin, it actually stops our skin from being able to synthesize vitamin D. So we need some exposure to the sun, in a controlled manner. So our Cancer Society says go out into the sun without sunscreen before 10 a.m. or after 4 p.m. to get that dose that we need to be able to have, to optimize bone and skeletal development. So we have these two main players in our bones called our osteoclasts and our osteoblasts. And one of them is breaking, that's the osteoclast, constantly breaking bone, and the osteoblasts are constantly building bone. And when we are under the influence of estrogen, we get this inhibition effect on the breaking part of the bone. And that protects our bones from losing too much, up to the age of 50, when we then withdraw estrogen from our bodies, and then that breaking is exacerbated. So from the age of 50, instead of losing that 0.5% to 1% from 30 to 50, we're now losing about 1 to 2% of our bone mineral density every year from the age of 50, and we can lose 20% of our entire bone mineral density in the 5 to 7 years around menopause. So it's even more important that we're getting the right nutritional building blocks for bone. But the other thing that we need for bone, which is the essence of my research, is we need mechanical strain in the bone. So the bone needs to receive forces, and these forces need to be specifically large enough and quick enough to switch bone on. And most people aren't getting those forces through their skeleton, firstly in those childhood, adolescent, young adult years, where we usually would say, of course we're getting those forces, but now because young people are choosing to spend more and more time on devices and in sedentary type activities, we can't actually assume that anymore. So firstly, we're not getting the best skeletons we can get in the first 30 years to see us out. And then a lot of the recommendations that are still sort of sitting out there, that people think that they just need to have weight-bearing activity to optimize bone health, well, that is not enough to optimize bone health. We actually need some mechanical forces through our bone to optimize bone health. And that's something that's starting to appear in our position statements. So, and that's great, but people still don't really know how to do it and how to do it safely. And I suppose that's a really big missing piece of the puzzle for optimizing bone.
I only heard about that, the force, because I've always thought, well, resistance training. But Stacey Sims, as you said, Dr. Stacey Sims has been great in getting that word out there. And I know she participated in some of your clinical trials in developing your OsteoGains app, which we'll talk about a bit later.
Sure.
But yeah, it's getting that word out there to the everyday person practically. So when you say practice statements, do you mean in the medical system?
Well, I suppose it's the guidelines that our health system uses to deliver messages to the population. So I know that ESSA, for example, does a great job in Australia, so Exercise Sports Science Australia, to deliver messages that basically endorsing a certain type of exercise, for example, for practitioners. So whether that's personal trainers, sports scientists, osteopaths, physiotherapists, they know that's credible resource that guides what they then can deliver with their patients. And so that message is already sitting there from the wonderful work that Dr. Belinda Beck, or Professor Belinda Beck, has done from Griffith University in that space as well. So she's guided a lot of those recommendations. So they're sitting there. People know it's, well, they may not know it's important. So it depends how connected the practitioners are with the cutting edge research.
I feel like it's starting now to get out there, and hopefully like podcasts like this will spread the message even further. Just stepping back before we get into practically what people can do to build strong bones, I was also surprised to learn about the relationship between our bones and the immune system and how they impact each other. Are you able to explain a little bit about that?
Well, all I could say there, I suppose, is that all of these systems are so interactive. So there's no system that works independently from another system. So, when we were talking about vitamin D before, which is misnamed as a vitamin, it's actually a hormone that plays a huge role in bone health, but also immune health. And every other aspect of our physiology requires a certain dose of vitamin D. So, we can't have one thing, one system strong without having, an effect on another system. So there definitely is a lot of connection there. And I don't know if you're familiar with the female athlete triad, which is some fantastic work done by Professor Mary Jane D'Souza that showed how that not eating enough fuel for, and the focus was on females initially, so not getting enough fuel for a young woman to be able to optimize her physiology and the activities that she does, forces the brain to turn off the production of estrogen. So the reproductive system is turned off at that point because there's not enough fuel for all of the systems to work, right? So you can see how the immune system could work in there as well, is that if that gets down regulated because there's not enough fuel, that's going to have a spin off on so many other things. But this particular relationship that I'm describing here, when the brain at point of the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, switches off the governing hormones that control the ovaries, they now are no longer producing estrogen, and now bone physiology is turned off. So now young women who have a cessation of their menstrual cycle, so we call that amenorrhea, that has a devastating effect on their bone physiology. So they start losing bone at a finite time that they have to actually grow bone. And sometimes that can be completely debilitating for not only their bone health at that time, but for their bone health in the future. So there's such an interaction of, I suppose, all of those systems. And the immune system has a lot to do with inflammation in the body. And so the body can't optimize its adaptations and I suppose its optimal physiology when it's having to deal with inflammation. And inflammation, of course, is a side effect of modern life. Eating wrong food, so lots of processed food, that exacerbates inflammation. Sedentary lifestyles exacerbates inflammation. Not getting enough good fats in our diet exacerbates inflammation. And all those things will have a negative consequence on our body being able to build effective bone and keep our bone and our, not just our bone, but our muscle as well, our musculoskeletal system in an optimal state.
That's such an important message for parents, but also teenage girls to be aware of. I had heard of menstruation ceasing if there's not enough fuel, but didn't understand the connection with estrogen. And as we know, estrogen is so protective of the bones.
That's right.
Is devastating. When you're saying you've really got your best chance to build your strong bones up to the age of 30 and their critical time is around puberty, really needs to be more education about that.
And I think a lot of young women see the cessation of their menstrual cycle as a positive thing, especially when they're young athletes. They're like, oh, well, I don't have a menstrual cycle. But the next minute they have a stress fracture. So a stress fracture is basically a red flag of abnormal physiology. Your bone should not crack longitudinally. That's not normal. So, if we are seeing things like stress fractures, then we not only are dealing with healing the stress fracture, but we're dealing with the overall energy balance and management of that athlete for not just their health now, but again, I say that word duty of care. We have to be conscious of how that is going to affect our young woman across her whole life cycle, not just her now.
Yeah, it's just so important to reinforce how everything works together as well, and just the lack of education. So we've talked about some of the factors in having strong bones and that we need to be thinking about this earlier than we do. So can you explain what happens to our bones as we age and how you've kind of said up until 30 is when we can build strong bones. So after 30 or perhaps after menopause, what are the changes and how early do they start?
Yeah, so how early they start is we start losing from the age of 30. So that's really the first place that we should see as a window of opportunity to actually start building our bone at a time, which is what my research showed. It's possible, even though the textbooks say you should be losing 0.5 to 1% of your bone mineral density a year. Well, that's in the absence of doing things that we know the bone needs, which currently most people aren't doing. So people are starting at 30, maybe becoming more low impact sort of in their activity and potentially not getting their nutrition right either. So not providing enough protein, enough calcium, enough vitamin D to be able to minimize those losses. But then post-menopause, it's doing the same. But what we don't know and there is limited research in postmenopausal women, is, can we continue to build bone, or are we just minimizing the losses? But either way we look at it, those are both benefits.
Yeah.
So if we can slow the losses, that's still a gain. So if we're supposed to be losing 2% of our bone mineral density and we lose 1%, we could see that still as a gain, as a benefit. But the other thing is that I told you about bone mineral density is probably telling 70% of the strength of bone. The other part of it, of the bone strength story, is the size of bone. So, something that hasn't really been reported in the literature very much, but I really focused in on this with my clinical trials, was measuring the actual size, the cross-sectional area of bone. So if you measure the bone around, can we actually make it more robust? Can we actually change the geometry of bone to make it structurally stronger and more resistant to fracture? And that's what was a huge change in the women that participated in my research. Yes, they improved their bone mineral density, but they also changed the shape of their bones. So the bones became stronger to be able to adapt and tolerate the forces that they were sort of imparting on their skeleton through doing my jump landing program. So this is a 2 to 3 minute program they were doing sort of at least 5 times a week. So not a lot of time commitment, yet the bone was being forced to remodel and change in its shape to tolerate these forces that they weren't getting in any other part of their lives. Yeah. So, I suppose if we're talking about postmenopausal women, well, they need to be doing some kind of impact exercise. That's absolutely key to being able to benefit the overall strength of the bone, not just bone mineral density. They also need to be very much focusing on muscle. So muscle, as we know, you talked about the immune system, but the thing is that once we go through menopause, we're in a much more catabolic state. Everything is inflamed. That inflammation starts to exacerbate. The overriding systems in our body are catabolic, breaking. Everything's breaking. Muscles breaking, bones breaking. We're just starting to lose all that well sort of earned muscle that we may have created in our first sort of 50 years. Now we're losing it. And the rate that we lose that muscle is going to have a far-reaching effect on every aspect of our physiology, including our bones, because the muscle pull on bone is an important stimulus. But things like our overall caloric need, for example, as we lose muscle, we need less calories on the daily. And most women don't make that calculation to say, okay, well, actually, I need to start cleaving back my energy in because of the muscle that I'm losing. But a better side or a better focus for women is actually work on keeping that muscle and developing more muscle as you age. That should be your absolute key sort of focus as you age, for functionality, for quality of life, and for stemming all of those catabolic processes, those stress-related processes. So we actually need more protein as we age. We actually need more calcium than we did at pre-50. So the calcium needs go up, and we probably didn't even meet them pre-menopause. So maybe we need to use some sort of supplement to help us with that, and not a calcium supplement, but a bone formula that has the combination of all the minerals that are required to build our bone with vitamin D. So, that's another focus for us. We really just can't accidentally go through, menopause and beyond just winging our diet. We need to start focusing on, am I getting the daily dose of protein that I need? And of all the things that my bones need, the calcium, the vitamin D, it's a big part of it. And dampening down that inflammation potentially with those good oils. So that's another thing that can really help with that, all those other things I've talked about, is either, if you can get more of those omega-3s in your diet through eating more fresh fish, getting your nut and seed oils, and, maybe in some instances taking supplementation to help with that as well, good cold press fish oil, flaxseed oil, that sort of thing. But, we're talking, a good 2,000 milligrams a day, every day for women.
So important how you mentioned how important nutrition is. Unfortunately, especially in our Western society, for women, a lot of time the focus has been be as skinny as you can. You don't want to have big muscles, or if I work out, I'm going to get massive muscles like a bodybuilder. And so a lot of the time, people aren't eating probably the right type of calories, as you say. And we really need to start thinking, as you said, more about supporting our bones, keeping muscle, building muscle. So what nutrients do we need and how much do we need to support that? I love that message.
And I think you made a good point there, Cass, is that our most at-risk people for osteoporosis are, of course, women, Caucasian women, and thin women. Okay, so that's our target audience for bone issues going forward. And then if you've got a family history or you've had some kind of meds that have affected your bone, like prednisone, which we know is something that's taken a lot to manage, those sorts of steroids to manage different conditions, they just decimate our bones. And then a lot of our women who have had sort of situations where they've had to take cancer medications, that tamoxifen, for example, that absolutely strip the calcium out of our bones. So, we've got a lot of people that have had early hysterectomies or whatever that have intervened with their estrogen production early, that have had even more time where the bone's been stripped out than I suppose we would predict.
So you mentioned osteoporosis there, and there's also a term osteopenia. Could you just briefly explain what the difference is between the terms and why it has such an impact on our health, why it's so important?
Cool. So the World Health Organization has defined these terms, osteopenia and osteoporosis, and basically they're based on T-scores that are determined from having a DEXA scan. So I'm sitting in my DEXA lab at the moment today. So I've got a DEXA machine in the background here. And a DEXA machine stands for dual energy X-ray absorptiometry, and it's a diagnostic tool that you normally would find in the hospital, or you might find it in your local pathology lab or radiology department, like an X-ray, but it doesn't have the same dose of radiation that you get from an X-ray. So that's why it can be used really, regularly and safely with individuals to measure bone mineral density. So, and exactly what those T-scores refer to is the amount of bone mineral density that's in your bone. So we can measure it with this kind of scan. So those T-scores are representing, I suppose, standard deviations away from the normal. So there's a normative database that you get compared to when you have a DEXA scan, and how far you fall away from that normal line represents the classifications that you talked about. So when you are at minus 1.5 standard deviations to minus 2.5 standard deviations below the normal, the mean, then that's called osteopenia, and that basically means low bone mass compared to the normal population. When you fall outside of that negative 2.5 standard deviations below the normal, that's when it's defined as osteoporosis. So that's, falling a long way from what is the predicted normal for your age. But you don't get a T-score until you're over 50. So that's the normative data is there. Otherwise, we have a Z-score that compares you, and we can pretty much predict it from that as well, because it looks at what normal bone mineral density looks like and what where you fit on that data. But it does just define you based on bone mineral density. So remember that there are other aspects that are important to bone health, but that's currently, I know that the World Health Organization is refining and looking at changing the way they define those two terms going forward. But at the moment, that's still the way things operate. And I know that it's quite sort of cut and dry in terms of the medical fraternity, where, once you're falling into those classifications, your GP is probably having a conversation with you about taking some kind of pharmacology to intervene with this situation of low bone mass or osteoporosis. So, and then, I suppose that's not something that I'm really qualified to talk too much about, is that pharmacological option. I know there's always a pharmacological option, but what I will say is some people don't have, they'll have side effects or some kind of negative experience with some of the options of pharmacology, not just osteoporosis, but anything, And I suppose what I'm trying to push is how many incredibly effective options are that are easy for the average person to integrate into their lifestyles, and whether those things fall alongside pharmacology or ahead of pharmacology where a lot of people want to see how far they can go with nutrition and adding mechanical strain to the skeleton before they then look at those other options, or whether together they can be even more powerful. There's lots of options there, but most people are never told about those other options. And that's, I suppose, something what we're doing, Cass. We're to empower people with tools to be able to affect their own health journey.
Yeah. Get the word out there and the awareness, and people can know that there's more than just pharmacology available. And with little interventions that don't take up a lot of time, that can really have an impact, which we're going to get to your research in a minute. But I thought before we did, could you just talk to how exercise impacts our bone health? What's happening with the muscle and the bone?
It's all about adaptations. So what we know is that our body will stay exactly the same if we do exactly the same. Okay, so the only way to get our body to adapt and change, and whether that's growing our muscles, and you talked about women being afraid to gain muscle, there's not many women that can gain muscle. Not naturally. It's just very, very hard to do. And if you follow Dr. Stacey Sims, I love, she talks about lifting heavy shit. I love that. And women have to not be afraid to actually lift heavy weights, because for most women, lifting light weights, which is what most women have been prescribed to do over the years, is an absolute waste of time. It's not going to do anything. It's going to provide some cardiovascular benefit, but the muscles aren't going to change. We need our muscles to be stronger. And for most women, they're going to get stronger without really changing much in size anyway, because it's just so hard to gain muscle. But that muscle is important for our quality of body composition. Just adding a little bit more strength to our muscles will increase the overall energy cost of our bodies. So we now need more fuel to maintain that muscle. And what that can lead to, is, of course, is us becoming leaner. Because if we keep our food the same, then we're now in a, I suppose, negative caloric sort of deficit. And now our bodies will, if we're still exercising, potentially we become leaner. So we lose some body fat, which is, most people don't see that as being the way to losing body fat, gaining muscle. Most women are still stuck in that dogma of, I've got to just go out and do hours and hours of low intensity sort of work, which is, it's not the way. And most women don't enjoy that. So it's almost like a sacrifice, which is not going to achieve the outcomes that women are looking for. So from a muscle perspective, and as we get older, it has to be heavier and heavier. So more intensity is what we're creating. So if we want to make a difference to our body, we've got to create a stimulus that is over what our body is used to. So we can't be in the comfort zone. It's not about doing long sessions. There's so much value for us as we age in that high intensity sort of intermittent work. So high intensity with a recovery, high intensity, and the sessions can be 30 minutes or less. We don't need a lot of time dedicated to the type of exercise that's actually what our body needs. And that muscle also plays a powerful role in its interaction with our skeleton. So the stronger our muscles are, the more they pull on the bone and create a stimulus that actually is positive for our bone as well. The other thing that our bone needs is it needs some forces traveling through the bone. So some good impacts to actually travel through the bone, and that will have an effect on those osteoblasts and osteoclasts. So it actually creates like a sort of a shear force across the layer of the bone that, I won't go into too much of the physiology, but essentially it increases the growing of bone, so the strengthening of bone. And that's not just the mineral, that's also the structure. So the overall geometry of the bone will change, but only when it is forced to. So if we're just doing low impact exercise, there's no stress on the bone at all. So it won't change and it'll regress the way that the age predictions tell us. But if we can get some of those forces through the bone, then that will actually stem some of the losses and stimulate the bone to have to become stronger to overcome the regular stimulus that you're imparting on it. And I sort of mentioned earlier about, it's not about, spending hours doing this. Our bone needs only a couple of minutes of this a day. That's it. And so it's so achievable for the average woman to do this and to not sort of put barriers in front of the sort of stresses of having to exercise for long periods of time and wear specific clothing and go to a specific place and pay money and get childcare and all those sorts of things. It's my women that were in my clinical trials, they made comments like, I did the program while my kettle was boiling, or while my porridge was cooking in the microwave, or, while I was at the park with my child, or I stood up at work, because we need to stand up, and there's so much more awareness that sitting is the new smoking. Okay, we want to break up prolonged periods of sitting. So a lot of my women were, administrative workers. They would just take off their shoes, stand up, do the jump, sit down, and away they go again, So It's not something that you have to fret about where you're going to fit it, because it can fit anywhere. And I think that needs to be the focus of a lot of women that are struggling to exercise consistently, and not just for my bone health program, but thinking of every movement is a muscle contraction. And we've got to think about how valuable every opportunity we give our body to move is. And we have to celebrate all those little snacks of exercise that we can just sneak in, whether we're doing that by being more vigorous with, things we have to do, like, housework or mowing the lawns, or, stuff that we're doing that we've got to do anyway. Take those as opportunities to actually tick off some exercise. It doesn't have to be planned exercise that, the way that people think it needs to be. It really is about it, thinking of every day as being a certain number of hours and trying to sneak, at least 30 minutes of some kind of activity that's purposeful into those days. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can tack it on, like you said, to your everyday chores or duties around the house, or you could tack it on to the end of your normal resistance training program or your normal exercise program.
Absolutely. Or, if you're going for a walk because you love walking, that's great. I'm not saying don't go walking, but walking's not enough for our bones. It's not enough. Tacking it in, or it might be integrating some of these heavy footfalls into your walk. So knowing that you've got to get some of these. So yes, I would love people to get going on my app and follow it. But the essence of what I'm instructing people to do can be integrated into their lives. As long as you are doing it, that's the important thing.
Yeah. So we should say the app you've developed is called Osteo Gains, and we will link to it in the show notes.
Yeah.
It provides information and the practical exercises, like you said, guided for, a few to 5 minutes a day. Can you tell us how you got the idea? You did some clinical research that led to the development of the app, is that right? Can you tell us a bit about that research and where you got the ideas from, or how did you know, when did you come to learn that jumping, that forceful impact is great for our bones?
Yeah. So when I was doing my deep dive into the research before I sort of started this block of studies that sort of spanned, we're still going, so 10 years, I suppose. First of all, it was finding the information that said, these are some of the factors that need to be ticked off for bone to be switched on. So it's understanding how much force, so the magnitude of force, how quickly the force needs to be applied, and what direction the force needs to be applied in. The doses, how much force can the bone take before it's saturated. So understanding things like sensitivity of bone and rest periods. So how long does the bone have to rest before it's ready to receive another one of those forces? So I found a lot of this research already, but it was done mainly in animal studies. So it was like, okay, there's some serious indication that this can work. There were a smattering of research studies that were done in humans, but none of them really were standing up for me in terms of the things that I saw in the research weren't being, I suppose, there just wasn't enough a representation of what the research was suggesting in the research studies. So people were absolutely on board with the fact that we had to jump. And that's what the existing research was showing, getting women to jump and measuring their bone mineral density. There was mixed results that were being shown there. And I think a lot of the limitations in that existing research was that nobody taught these women how to land. It's not about jumping, it's about landing. And if you think about how you're taught to land your whole life, that is the correct way to land, absolutely. But it's not the correct way to land for your bones. Okay, so I'm not trying to get people to stop landing the way that they've been taught to land in netball and gymnastics and all the rest of it, because we land like that because we don't want those forces to be constantly imparted through our body, or we'd blow our joints apart. Okay, so when we do our jump landings, our jump landing program that's focused and targeted on our bones, it's completely different. And that's where I had to work out how to create some jump landings that I could be confident that women could do in their own homes unsupervised once they were cued the right way. So the first couple of years of research involved force platforms and getting women to practice some of these jump landings and measuring the forces and whether, if they did it a certain way, could I guarantee they would achieve the quantity, like the amount of force, the rate of force development, and over time, could I create the angles of pull that the bone needs to get that holistic development. So there was a couple of years of research into those jump landings, and they really, when you see the program, it's so simple and it's not rocket science, but it is all about how you land. It's how you hit the ground, and it has to be bone jarring forces. And that's why you've got to do it in a guided way. So I worked out exactly what those protocols were and integrated best practice sport and conditioning sort of principles all the way through it to be able to create a 12-month program. So I've actually got 2 years of programming now ready to go. So the first year is available, and there's nearly 30,000 women doing this out in the world. But the second year will click into place once our first people have graduated from the first year, because I suppose one thing I need to say is that, yes, you could do this program is designed for 12 months, but you can never stop providing the stimulus. It's like saying, well, I did weight training for the first 50 years of my life. Is that going to see me out the rest of my life? Well, of course not, because the training principle of reversibility says as soon as you take away the stimulus that created the change, you will lose the adaptations. They will just slowly be lost. So we can't ever think that we've done everything we can for our muscles, we've done everything we can for our bones. It may not be realistic to do the same things we did pre-50, post-50, but we keep having to do what we can do to the best of our abilities safely for the rest of our lives, for our muscles, for our bones. So this jump landing program, as long as people can tolerate those forces, people have to be providing those kind of stimulus to their bones for the rest of their lives to optimize their bone health.
Is there a particular age group with the year of programming that you've released on the app? Is that tailored to a particular age group, or is that for anyone at this point?
Yes, so my research was done in premenopausal women. So I did it in premenopausal women because they still had some estrogen on board, and I wanted to see how much of a difference can I make when the textbooks are predicting that you cannot gain anything in this time. You can only lose 0.5 to 1% of bone mineral density. And I've cut to a little bit of the sort of finish line there. As my women gain up to 4% bone mineral density at their hip, which is one of the clinical sites, and 0.5 to 3% at the lumbar spine. So remember, this is a time where you should be losing 0.5 to 1%. They were getting these amazing gains in response to this 2 to 3 minute jump landing program. So I did it in premenopausal women because I wanted to see how effective it could be, but it can be done by women of any age. So postmenopausal women, yes, absolutely, as long as you can tolerate the forces. And I would say the only difference for postmenopausal women and beyond is being more progressive and more conservative about progressing with taking more force. So that's probably the main thing we say. Who is it targeted at? Well, it was developed for premenopausal women, but it can be used across the whole life cycle and for men and women, together. It doesn't really matter. I designed also a program called the preconditioning program, which I recommend that women do for 4 weeks before they start the jump landing program to prepare them to be able to tolerate those forces and to get them to get familiar with some easy jumping movements. Because one of the questions I asked my women, who were an average age of 40 in my initial research, was, when was the last time you jumped? And even as 40-year-olds, they would say decades ago. They couldn't even remember the last time that they had done any kind of jumping. You can't just come into doing these really precise and targeted jump landings until you can ensure that your core is strong, your legs are strong, that you have some movement competency with doing some jumping, that you're safe to be able to start. And that's why the 4-week program was developed. So the understanding is that women will do this program, which is about 20 minutes long, 3 times a week for 4 weeks before they begin. Now, lots of women will skip that preconditioning program because they're already very active. They're doing their own structured programs. They're familiar with jumping and they're confident to go into that. But if women are postmenopausal, more and more important that they do that preconditioning program, and then they start the jump landings slowly, and they only progress as they can tolerate those forces without pain.
And I should say, I've downloaded the app. I'm going to commence the program. So I saw the conditioning and I had a quick look through the program, the first 4 weeks.
Yes.
So if people are listening to this thinking, what, jumping? It's jumping off the ground initially. The timer there to show you the rest five times between jumps, and it's really easy to follow
easy.
along.
We cue it the whole way, and to be honest, we've refilmed a lot of our work, and the whole app is being redeveloped. So as we're actually getting some, because we've self-funded this, so we're totally out of pocket with what we've done, and it's unlikely that I'll ever leave my day job. This really is a passion project, and my professor, who was my PhD supervisor, has invested his own money into this. So he believes in this so strongly, and he lost his own mama to osteoporosis. So, and as so many of us do, and it's a terrible way to go, where elderly people fall and snap a femur, or snap their pelvis.
Because it can be so debilitating, or even early mortality.
For that. So we're redesigning it. We're making it better because we're academics. We're not personal trainers, motivators. We're not those people. So we're doing our best to create a product that people can follow worldwide and feel safe that they're doing things right. But we're still making changes and we're making it better. So in the next, I think, 3 weeks, you'll be prompted to an upgrade, and it'll have a whole new look. So better contrast. So even things like, when we get people to look at it and they say, well, actually the contrast for colourblind people may not be optimal. There's just things you'll never think of. And we're just constantly trying to make it a better product for people. Stacey's a really big fan of what we're doing, and she's fantastic at talking about our research wherever she goes, and promoting what we're doing, because it's the first of its kind ever. And it's an opportunity, a really, really easy way for women to actually make a difference to their bone health, for sure.
And it is so easy to follow along, and good on you for doing that. Like you said, you're raising awareness, you're letting people know, but you've created a great product that it's so easy to fit into a routine. Yeah, it's really good.
Yes, I'm glad you're doing it. That's awesome.
No, of course, because like I said before, I first heard of this because I follow Dr. Tracey, and she's so informative and such a great advocate for women's health.
Oh, absolutely.
But I'm like, okay, yep. So I before I downloaded your app, I just started doing a few things at the gym, probably not right. I'm like, well, how do I actually implement this? Where do I go to find out how I should start? And your app is, of course, great for that, because there is nothing around to let you know how to progressively build up the jumps, where to start, the preconditioning. So it is fantastic. You don't get this information anywhere else. It's great.
And hopefully more and more people are going to start integrating it into their practice. So a couple of weeks ago, I did a big webinar for Exercise Sports Science Australia. So they have 11,000 sports scientists. And so a lot of my information will be accessible to these people to be able to start, integrating some of these movements into not just, the women that I've targeted at, but, we talked a little bit about our young athletes and our athletes that are in non-weight bearing sport. They need to be able to create some jump landing forces into their program to be able to optimize the development of their skeleton, in that time where they're absolutely most primed to do so. So it's not just for women post-menopause. It's, that's right.
If you can. So my daughter is 17. She
Yeah.
plays soccer, so she trains
Yes.
quite a bit. But should I be getting her to incorporate some of this as well, few minutes, a few times a week, or?
Yeah, well, it's not going to do her any harm, and to sort of, like you say, tack it onto an existing program, or maybe just, when she's at home and there's a little downtime with the family. I mean, you can
Do
easily
it
just get up
together.
and do it. Yeah, we'll do it with her. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Go outside onto grass, take your shoes off, and just do your jumps together. So,
yeah.
it is really just about, just spreading the word about what you can do, because, athletes can be at a lot of risk too, especially when they're in that low energy availability. So we just have to be very careful of managing our young female athletes, that we giving them the right advice about how to optimize energy, so getting enough calories, and what some of the consequences are of not getting that right. And sometimes that can be a powerful motivator for them to be more vigilant with how they're eating around training and the rest of the time, because they feel pretty bulletproof when they're teenagers. But there's the prediction is that if you can gain just a 10% more bone in those first 30 years, then there's a buffer of 15 years before you're going to suffer from osteoporosis and fractures at the other end. That's massive. So not that your 17-year-old daughter's going to give two stuffs about her bones right now. You know what I mean?
Well,
So
she'll hear me banging on about it all the time. I'm always on my
yeah,
kids about, you got to build muscle mass now. This is your critical window,
yeah,
your
yeah,
peak
yeah, yeah.
time.
And the more you can deliver those messages, Cass, I think that's really good. And they will, and if they don't take it from mum, they'll take it from, connecting it with someone really influential like Stacey, for example, and just
Yeah.
listening to the messages that are going out to women to empower them. And it's different to, when I was 17, I just didn't have that messaging.
No, it was
Yeah.
all about how skinny can you look, how,
Yeah,
it's just the
absolutely.
wrong message.
The wrong
Strong is
messages.
beautiful. Strong is healthy.
Absolutely.
Strong is
Absolutely.
going to set you up for a
Yeah,
functional, independent, older age.
absolutely.
That's so good. I'm sure there's a lot of women listening at home, particularly probably postmenopausal and beyond. They might be thinking, I can't jump, that sounds too hard, or they may have some health issues that prevent
Yeah.
them being freely mobile. What would you
Mm.
suggest to them apart from getting maybe some clearance from their own medical practitioner? Do you have any tips for them?
That's a good point, is that this program may not be for everyone. So some people are going to have injuries, they're going to have mobility issues, they're going to have pain. I know that there's a lot of indication that, this is not going to exacerbate issues like osteoarthritis, for example. As long as you have good form with the way that you do this jumping, for example, then you can still get benefit. So we don't want to be just assuming we can't do it because there's other things we can't do. But definitely, if you have coordination or balance issues, it's holding onto a wall or the back of a chair when you do the jumps. And I know jumping, just saying the word jumping can put some barriers up for people. It's actually not about jumping, it's about landing. So you might only clear the ground by half a centimetre. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care how high you jump. I just want you to land stiffly. So it's about the landing. And that's going to be really weird for people because they've never been told to land like that before. And I don't want them to land outside of when they're doing their bone focus stuff. But whatever you can do that's more than what you were doing is going to be better. Some of our exercises we've quantified since the development of the first iteration of this program involve things like stomps and heel drops that don't have a flight phase as well. So they're going to be more doable for people that cannot tolerate that jumping movement. Some, like your 17-year-old daughter, is probably going to do a massive jump from the ground, but she may not do it when she's been cued how to land. So you're only going to jump as high as you can land, if that makes sense. So you're going to maybe just do a centimetre or two. That's how high, and you will develop your ability to jump higher over time as you become more confident in how you land. And that's the key. The key is not to go jump off a box at the gym or whatever. No way. You'd absolutely blow your knees and your hips apart landing the way that I'm instructing you to land. There's no equipment that's used in my program, although you do a very, very low drop jump, which is off a typical step at home, so a 20 centimetre step. but you
Okay.
build into that. And for
Yeah.
some people, they may not actually like that one. So leave it out. You know what I mean? Use
Excellent.
one of the other ones that you've done. The other thing I would say for people that absolutely cannot tolerate any of those landing forces, then the weight training is a key focus at that point. So getting into doing that muscle work is absolutely key. You know, it doesn't matter how poor your bone health is or your joint health. If you can, whatever you can tolerate in the resistance sort of realm, should be your focus. Like, you're not focusing on what you can't do, you're focusing on what you can do. I mean, there's been some value in, some people have done jump landings in swimming pools. So to actually get, you know, as a progression. So not in a deep pool, obviously. So a pool where you might be up to your, you know, your waist or something like that, and doing the jumps in the water so that some of your weight is being held by the water.
So that might be a place to start for some
It could
people.
be a good place to start for some people, for sure. But yeah, it is about thinking, well, what can I do that puts a little bit more force through my skeleton, but doesn't exacerbate any other pre-existing conditions, and trying and being very conservative with that initial trial, you know, those movements that you can tolerate.
That's fantastic. It's a great program. And like we were saying, there's no other education that I've seen teaches you how to do this and build it up progressively, which is what we need, that progressive.
Yeah, over the year. So I mean, you end up with 56 weeks of sort of programming. So the way the app works, so the 4 weeks of the preconditioning program, then 52 weeks of the jump landing program.
I just had a thought. I know that the research was on premenopausal women. What if men are thinking, well, I know osteoporosis affects more women than men, but it still affects men. Can they try it out as well? Would it be helpful?
Of course, absolutely. And a lot of our at-risk males are, you know, even our young athletic males who are in sort of like cycling, like swimming sports where they're not actually getting any kind of impact into their skeletons, that can actually have a really negative effect to their bones. Their muscles might look great and all the rest of it, but their bone health may actually be quite compromised through not getting the stimulus through the skeleton. But yeah, males of any age can benefit from this, but they still need the same, you know, it's human bone that this research is based on. So it's applicable to males as well, but males are lucky that they have, you know, 20% more bone than women as a starting point, and that they are just slowly losing bone, still from that 30, 35 years of age over their lifespan. They don't have a cliff to fall off at menopause where they go from half to 1 to now 2% a year. They're just slowly losing that half to 1 for their entire lives. So, but some men are also more at risk. So men that are very thin, for example, men that have a family history of osteoporosis, men that have excluded, you know, some of those food groups like your calcium containing foods and have vitamin D deficiency, have been medicated with things like your steroidal medications that have negative side effects on bone. So yeah, effective for everyone. But I just think it's quite refreshing that this actually is focused on women. So this is actually a program that has totally been developed through data that has been extracted from women. It's been focused on women. It's an app for women.
As we know, until recent times, most of the research is done on men. And I mean, women's research doesn't get as much funding as the research for men. Hopefully that's starting to change a bit, and especially for the midlife and beyond research. It's attracting more dollars, I think, but people like you said, this is a passion project and you want to get this education out there. It's fantastic.
And we want to research into that postmenopausal space as well. Yeah. So, you know, when I did the research, I was already postmenopausal and I got the same amazing results that the premenopausal women got. So, you know, and I, you know, early to menopause through probably my extreme sort of athletic career. So, yeah, I wasn't expecting that I would have the same benefits that I observed in the other cohort. My results were exactly the same.
It's such a little investment for such a big gain, and so important at this time of life, or all life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just wanted to ask you, earlier in the conversation, you mentioned a calcium supplement if we don't get enough calcium in our diet. You said that's not sufficient. We should be looking at an overall bone health formula. What should we be looking for?
just a bone health supplement of some kind. So calcium on its own is not going to do anything except dissolve in the blood, and it can actually create increased health issues. And the Women's Health Initiative research showed increase in myocardial infarction in women taking calcium supplements, because calcium isn't used exclusively in bone. It's used with magnesium, boron, vitamin K2, vitamin D, pulls it out of the gut. So there's all these things that have to be present for calcium to be effective and utilized by the bone. So it's not just taking a independent vitamin on it, on its own. It's taking in combination. So, I'm not in a place to recommend a specific, but people can find out for themselves if they go talk to their pharmacy or their health shop or someone they trust who works in that nutrition dietitian sort of space. But I've done talks for like Algae Cow, for example, over in the States. They have like millions of followers and their product looks amazing. And they have clinical data that shows it to be effective in building bone mineral density independent of other factors, and their product is basically an algae from the ocean, so a lot of the products that we're looking for, they come from nature. A lot of bone formulas are like crushed green lip mussel shells or basically bone itself. Dolomite, that's one that used to be taken years ago. It's actually thinking like that's what you're taking as a supplement. You're taking something that already exists in nature that has all of the things that we're looking for. So, I'd say just if people can be just thinking about the fact that it's not calcium that they're looking for, it's a bone supplement. So something that has everything that bone needs to actually integrate this into its structure.
And what are some of apart from the ones you mentioned, what are some of the other nutrients that we should be looking for in the supplement?
So protein's something, that could be in the supplement or independent of, because that's what bone is, it's protein. That's what our whole body is protein. Wow. So if we're not getting enough protein, our body just can't turn over and adapt and optimally. So we're going to be always in a state of disrepair without enough protein. But I suppose the things that I mentioned there, which are really key, are, the calcium, magnesium, boron, K2, vitamin D are probably key ones to be looking for. So if you're looking for at least those, then you'll do well.
Thank you.
You don't really want to be just taking a supplement either. So we know that food is the most bioavailable form of getting all of the building blocks for bone. So most of the guidelines say you shouldn't be trying to get any more than 500 milligrams a day in supplemental form for that bone formula. And the rest of it should come from food. So just trying to get, if you can tolerate dairy, that's great. Otherwise, check your labels in your plant-based alternative milks to make sure that they're fortified with the same amount of calcium. So around that 120 milligrams per 100 mils is what you're looking for, which is what milk is. So not in things like rice milk and soy and those sorts of products. They don't contain calcium naturally, so it has to be added in by the manufacturer. And so we're hoping, we can't just expect that the manufacturer has done that for us. And some have and some haven't. And getting more nuts on the daily, like almonds especially, are fantastic. Sesame seeds are fantastic. Tahini is a fantastic product, crushed sesame seeds. Eating the bones when you're having canned fish, green leafy vegetables, all that stuff.
So as I'm interested in all the ways people mind their being, could you share with us 3 ways that you personally mind your own being? Could be particular food and exercise.
Yeah. Running is my joy still. So I'm 57 now and I still just run as many days as I can. It's my happy place. So I don't run my old marathon paces and I don't think about racing. I'm just in my own head and in my environment. So I think finding something that you love that's physical, and so for me it is that running is beautiful for me. Another thing which I find, again, is physical, I am a really physical person, is I love aqua jogging. So I like to jog in the deep water without a belt, and it's just beautiful. Just the feeling, like one of the things I notice as I'm aging is body's just getting sorer, and the range of motion is something that you can achieve in that aquatic environment. There's just something so peaceful and beautiful about being in the water. So, even if you can't swim, just getting in the water and walking in the water or where your feet are on the ground or in the ocean. I mean, you guys are lucky in Australia. Your ocean is beautiful all year round. Just hopping in the water and just being in it, just walking in it, it's just such a beautiful thing. I suppose the other thing, it's only 3 things, isn't it? Stretching.
Whatever you want.
Like doing that. But from a nutrition perspective, it's about being respectful of my body most of the time. So I'm definitely not perfect. I've taught nutrition for, nearly 35 years, but I think I'm good most of the time. Like I'm respectful of my body and just knowing that, and actually just feeling good about, I put this in my body, it's great for my body, like getting more protein. I know how important that is, and just feeling good about the decisions you make. If I'm going to eat a donut or some chocolate or whatever, who cares? I'm going to have a glass of wine, that's great. Anything that I do, I want to just be happy about doing it. And so it's never feeling guilt about anything, because you can always do things differently tomorrow or later in the day. Just put everything in the context of just
what you do most of the time. But if you're going to have that donut and chocolate, which just enjoy it.
Absolutely. Just enjoy everything that you do, and just know that, at the end of the day, what you eat and what you do is your body. You're not going to accidentally age well. You're not going to accidentally, have good body composition or skin or whatever it is, teeth, bones. All that stuff is basically what you eat and what you do. So just having that epiphany moment of, actually, this is the same as me. I probably could take some supplements or take some pills or whatever. Actually, that's not, we've got so many more powerful tools in our toolkit that can actually affect our health so much better. So, and that gives me mental clarity and well-being, as well as, being grateful every day for my 57-year-old body still running up the mountain and playing tennis and going surfing and mountain biking and playing with my kids. My boy's big, he doesn't play with me anymore. But I've got a 12-year-old, and so it's just having the ability to just be in the world and be
doing
grateful
the things that you want to do.
Absolutely, whatever those are.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, good.
Where can people find the OsteoGains app, and where can people find out more about you?
Thanks for that, Cass. So if they go to the Apple store or to the Google Play store and search OsteoGains, it's available there. And we've also got an OsteoGains website, so you could go check out our website there, find out a little bit about me, probably by searching that. I've been doing a lot of different podcasts and presentations across the world and doing lots of research. So you can actually access our research from the apps and the website. That's probably the best place to go to find out about what we're doing and our passion for, delivering this. It's $24.99 to actually download the app programming, but you can download the app itself for free to be able to see all our research and watch our videos and all that sort of stuff. But if you want to do our 52-week program and our 4-week preconditioning program, that's $24.99. Yeah,
it's just more for us to pay for what you get in it.
Absolutely.
Clinical research back. Like, what more could you ask? It's great.
Absolutely. So yeah, the more people that sort of get amongst this, the better, I think, for these stats for osteoporosis just blowing out of proportion. Like the stats for where we're going with this disease is just, it's terrible.
Horrendous. With an aging population, the burden's going to be even greater.
Absolutely.
I can't thank you enough, Tracey. This has been a fantastic conversation.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Cass.
You're such a passionate advocate for women's health. I really appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you very much for asking me, and keep doing the great work that you're doing, Cass.
Well, good luck to you too with the app. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Mind Your Being podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it helpful, please follow the show wherever you get your podcasts and share it with a friend who might enjoy it too. If you have a moment, please leave a quick review. It really helps others discover the podcast. Thanks again for being here. Take care, and until next time, mind your being.